initiative, a little bit about what we're seeing today in terms of the pipeline of active projects that we're aware of, and then introduce DMC's framing for what we're looking to do going forward for the next 10 years. So we're really at this midpoint inflection point. So DMC was voted into law with the state legislature in 2013 to start in 2015 and run 20 years. And as part of that enabling legislation, we, every 5 years, take a moment to pause, look back, say, what do we think was going to happen? What did happen? Where are we now? What is the market situation now? What is going on in the community? And reproject forward for the next 5 years. And so that's where we are now. This is the second 5-year update to that 20-year development plan. And so the first step in that was really this look back. And I know at least some of you were able to attend our second quarter DMCC board meeting and the subsequent joint session where we looked back at the first 10 years and measured what has happened against the 5 major goals that DMC is set up to feed into. So these are the 5 goals here. One of them has to do with aligned planning, and sort of making sure that we're in sync with all of the other amazing planning efforts happening at the state, county, and city levels. Another has to do with how much private and public investment is set for the trajectory of the life of the DMC. And those are our annual certifications that come out every year that tell everybody how much construction activity basically has happened within the district. We measure jobs. We're kind of right at the midpoint of the projected job growth. So that was great news. We look at taxes, and these are net new taxes generated. And the bulk of that number is coming from payroll taxes off of the new jobs that have been generated. And then finally, experience. And how are we measuring people's experience? A big part of the founding of DMC was about that experience gap and sort of closing that experience gap in the downtown. And so there are a lot of ways that we're trying to look at that experience. I would say for this group, I think what's really exciting is the number of downtown residents has more than doubled in the first 10 years of DMC. So we thought that was exciting to see the data behind that. And for those that are interested in like the full presentation, that is available on our website. It was recorded, and you can download the PowerPoint presentation and get lots of data there. So this is a reminder of the sort of 5 different groups that we were set up to look at through the DMC initiative. Sorry, trying to make my window smaller so I can see them all here. So we think about the experience for employees, residents, patients, companions, and visitors in all the work that we do. But again, zooming in on the housing, this is the table from the original development plan that lays out sort of a prescriptive kind of projected trajectory of what was anticipated to happen in the downtown. Sorry, my red box got moved a little bit on my screen here, but residential is what you should be looking at, the line below hotel. 450 units in the first 5 years, an additional 750 were hoped for in the second 5 years. And then you can see continued kind of high number, all adding up to about 3,000 units over the life of DMC. So that was the original model, the original goal. So right now we're on track with that, and this is a conversation to have with this group, what's coming out of the Olmsted County and sort of joint housing needs assessment. And I think it's pointing towards maybe that goal of 2,850 needs to get revised upwards, but that's something that we can talk about. So kind of reflecting on where we are today. So this was the original projection, right? Divided into these kind of space types. And this is where we are in 2025 at this midpoint against each of those types of spaces. So you can see up there in the upper right, residential, we're about halfway through, and I have about 1,600 units that have been delivered in the DMC district. So looking a little deeper, the reason I kept hotels in, because I do think there is an interplay between different types of short-term living and longer-term housing. So it's always interesting to look at hotel keys alongside the housing production. So you can see here that we're about 400 hotel keys up on net over the last 10 years. And some of that's because some of those hotel keys came out and were converted to student housing. And then on a residential side, in 2015, there were about 1,100 units in the downtown. And right now we're at about 2,800 units of housing in the downtown. The number of multifamily buildings increased from 27 to 38. And we've seen, while housing costs have certainly increased, housing cost burden, and this is coming from the Housing Coalition's own study, housing cost burden decreased due to wage growth outpacing housing costs is kind of the preliminary look that we've had at that. So digging in a little bit deeper, like what are these projects? This is a table here that shows the projects that we're tracking, adds up to around 1,600 new units, and about 350 of those have income restrictions on them. And then looking forward, about 669 additional units have been allocated DMC funds. That's our sort of pipeline of projects that already have state infrastructure dollar authorized for those projects, and about 296 of those have income restrictions. And we'll look at those a little more closely here in a minute. Another thing we're looking at, though, is livability and where Rochester ranks and what that looks like over time. And so this is using a AARP metric and system, and you can see Rochester is doing really great there. And especially outperforms, probably no surprise, in the health category, with a much higher than national average patient satisfaction rate. Public safety doing really well. Opportunity is looking good. And then again, relative to other places that they evaluate, the housing cost burden rate in the community outperforms a lot of other places. So how are we thinking about this in DMC? Hopefully this looks familiar to a lot of you as well. We're not just thinking about rent and mortgage costs, but also what the transportation costs and utility costs are, and sort of looking at that holistically in terms of cost of living. These are the projects that currently have been allocated, what we call as GSIA funding. That's the state infrastructure dollars. The 4 projects that I'm showing here are the public realm investment that's on Second, and it's a sort of public realm component that breaks up a really long super block, and that will catalyze the development of a market rate rental housing project along Second, and then in partnership with First Homes, the developer is working on a 4-unit workforce for sale condo project, and that's what you see in the sort of yellow indication on the plan up there. Civic Center North project, which is Sherman Associates combination. Again, a lot of these are familiar because the coalition is also contributing to these projects. 265 units of market rate housing and 76 units of senior affordable housing. The Loom Apartments project up on Civic Center Drive, which is 141 50% AMI units. And then the first phase out at West Transit Village with Aon leading the charge on 75 units of senior affordable housing at 30 to 50% AMI. So those are the ones that are currently in the hopper from a DMC perspective. There are obviously other projects that are receiving city and coalition support in the downtown, but these are the 4 that are getting the GSIA funding so far. Wanted to dig a little slightly deeper into West Transit Village because I think there's so much amazing potential out there. Again, this is the BRT corridor. We've got these awesome mixed use potentials on either end of the corridor. Out at West Transit Village, this is something the DMC board since about 2019 has been supporting, is this concept that it shouldn't just be a park and ride, but really a true village, and what other components need to happen to realize that significant housing potential. This is the current kind of site configuration layout. The first project that we're talking about, that senior deeply affordable project, is this orange kind of bar wrapping Mayo structured parking deck there to really kind of give it that village feel from the very first phase. In the center here is envision the market rate housing component, and then on the west side of the site would be a second phase, which would be more family-oriented affordable housing there. So what are we doing right now as we move forward? Well, first off, we have to make sure we're coordinated with all of the, again, amazing efforts going on throughout the community. These are some of the plans that we're building off of. This isn't a new plan. This is just a refinement and update of our existing 20-year development plan. Some of the themes that have really been emerging from there, from that review that our consultants have been doing of those plans. You can see housing is one of the major themes, and that expansion of access to diverse and affordable housing and housing options is really a common refrain throughout all of those planning exercises. This is what DMC has been working from for the last several years around community priorities as it pertains to housing. Again, hopefully this looks super familiar and is aligned. And now I wanted to just sort of preview where we are today before we can get into some discussion. So like I said, this is our second 5-year update, and we really see this as an opportunity to move from our, sort of founding ideas around being America's City for Health and say, what does that mean as a strategy? And how can we really use that to shape the future of the city? And we're kind of dividing that into 3 subcategories: health innovation as an economic engine, health as an attractor, and health in the built environment. So this is kind of the longer explanation of that here. And so we're calling them 3 drivers for now. These are still in workshopping refinement mode, but we think these are really the things that can only happen in Rochester, and there's really exciting opportunities to look at the intersection of these and where they overlap. And our annual meeting is next week on September 18th. I hope all of you are going to be joining us. Please do if you are available. We're going to be focusing on kind of digging deeper into what we mean with each of these 3 drivers. And that will be a great opportunity to talk more about this focus and what we mean when we say health innovation as economic engine, or health in the built environment, or health excellence as an attractor. But today I thought I'd show one example of something. Again, this is work in progress, a proposal coming in that our team has been working on around if we could do these kind of wellness residences, where better to do them but in downtown Rochester. And this team is looking at something, again, I'm sure you're all very aware of, which is this rapidly, the gray tsunami, as some people are calling it, the sort of bubble of senior demographics that's coming for everywhere in the United States, and certainly in Minnesota and Rochester as well. And what would it take to enable more people to age in place, which is really what the desire is? And what would that mean for what our homes need to look like? And are there opportunities to do tech-enabled solutions for aging in place? And so this is some of the ideas that the team has been coming up with, and thinking about how we could be really a sort of leader in this space of what it could mean to sort of blur the boundary between clinical care and the home environment when it comes to the aging population, especially. And could this be a scalable framework that we could develop and pioneer here in Rochester? So this is just an example of something that kind of taking this new direction to really strategically center health in the way that we're thinking about all of our work. So I think, as I mentioned, there's a survey we'd love to hear from everybody. I think hopefully that link has been circulated to this group before, and there's that upcoming annual meeting where we're going to talk about the health drivers next week, as well as we're planning a public open house in late October, and I hope to see many of you there.
Thanks so much, Catherine. Some really exciting things in the pipeline, including a lot of different variety of affordable housing opportunities too. That's very exciting. What kind of questions do you have for Catherine? Anyone? Yes, Dave.
Catherine, I appreciate the work you've been doing in, the DMC has been doing in workforce housing, which I assume is the income restricted housing, where that
Yes.
counts at senior housing, because those were both part of the downtown housing plan. And also this new initiative that deals with wellness residences. I would just ask you never, ever, ever again use the phrase "gray tsunami." Longevity isn't a disaster. It's just what happens. So, but I appreciate the work DMC's been doing in that area and be very interested in hearing more about it.
Yes, thank you. And yeah, I thank you for that perspective. And I do think this wellness and health span is something that we're really interested in thinking as much as we can about as well. So I really appreciate those comments, and I appreciate your continued feedback. And like I said, this is midstream work, and we are really looking forward to continuing to coordinate. So,
One more thing. Are you working with the Smith Group on that? I know they're consulting you on other things, but that's because I know Smith Group is into that, into senior residences.
that
Actually longevity design.
Right. Yeah, they aren't specifically involved in that project team. That has really originated from a technology and developer partners that are kind of coming to Rochester and hearing about what's happening here and are interested in it. So I don't know that there's actually specific designers affiliated with the project yet. But I would hope that Smith Group can continue to sort of bring their expertise into the framework in a way that's collaborative.
Catherine, it's Dave Dunn here. Question for you on the housing work and kind of trying to allow people to remain in their homes. Is that primarily, as you think about that, in the technology in new construction or in kind of existing homes, or some combination of both?
Yeah, I think it would. So it's, I think, simpler in some ways in new construction, right? Because you have the flexibility, but I think anything that's going to be obviously retrofitting of existing structures is the bulk of the market, right? So I would be hopeful that solutions can be applicable in both areas. I would say the next step that the team is looking at is to do a prototype accessory dwelling unit that would be something that would be tourable, and like people could kind of test things out and see how it works. And so I think once that is in place, then it'll be probably better understanding of what's a retrofit option versus what would only work in new construction.
Thank you.
Patrick?
Yes, Catherine, thanks for going through this. You've spent some time on the West Transit Village and the housing that's going in there. It's good to see. I know some of it's still like just visioning as opposed to hardcore plans. Is there any visioning like that on the East Transit Village and what that will be someday? Or is that still just part of the small area plan and to be determined?
Yeah, it's still part of small area plan to be determined. I think as we're continuing to work on West Transit Village and learning from that, I imagine that, you know, in the next several years, the East end will get that same sort of attention, but from my perspective, not yet.
Thank you.
Any appetite for ownership type properties downtown, condominiums? You had any developers come in and talk to you about that?
Yeah, so it's good that you bring that up because it's something we've been hearing a lot of interest in. So we feel like there's definite lots of demand for it. And trying to, so this small prototype that I mentioned that's at along 2nd Street there, adjacent to the mid-block passageway. That will be a workforce for sale 4-unit building, so at a very small scale, right? But again, we kind of see it as a potential prototype. Really excited about that partnership with First Homes. And we are contemplating, so, every spring, DMC holds a real estate developer investment summit. And last April, the focus was on tech-enabled housing for aging in place. And we're contemplating, because we've heard so much interest in this for sale condo demand, maybe making that the focus of this April's convening so that we could get people together to talk about that. I think a gating issue is the state level liability constraints around that 10-year tail for contractors, architects, developers that has really dampened interest in getting people to develop these kinds of projects. I think, and I saw that Rochester's getting a senior cooperative housing project. I do think cooperative ownership structures maybe represent one potential path towards having something that's ownership in the downtown, because we certainly are hearing a lot of demand and not getting developers stepping up to say, hey, I want to build this. So trying to figure out what could unlock that. And I think, unfortunately, some of it is state level liability law that has dampened that market.
Lots more questions coming up here. Helen.
This is a little bit beyond what we usually talk about out here at the Alliance, but I noted that you mentioned the growth in luxury hotel room space. And what some of us are seeing in our churches and nonprofits are because we took away some of the lower cost hotels, those who are coming, you had the 5 different groups, but the patients and their families who are here are finding it very difficult to afford being here. There's some pressure, I think, maybe with more of the B&Bs because people are trying to do that. But are we looking at anything beyond luxury hotels because of those other segments of people here in the city every year?
Yeah, that's really good feedback as we continue to look at our data. Is to maybe it's what it's making me think is we should maybe try to break down that data and sort of segment out what, not just saying hotel keys, but sort of look at where they are in terms of whether it's price point or service level ratings or things like that. I don't have that data in front of me, but I think that's where we, DMC is really set up to invest in the infrastructure, and we really need to be partners in order to see some of these projects come forward. So I think it's certainly an interesting thing to think if there are particular groups that are interested in sort of tackling that project, and whether or not they could structure something that would be within the wheelhouse of what DMC can support on the infrastructure side. But I think what I'm hearing is there's an interest in digging a little bit deeper into some of our data to sort of segment out what you're seeing happening in the community from a sort of price point data level. Is that fair to say?
That would be
Yeah.
helpful. Thank you.
That'd be great. Thanks. Amy?
I was really interested when you said wage growth outpaced housing costs, so burden has decreased. How big a change is that, and how does that compare with like Minneapolis, St. Paul, Duluth? Or maybe you don't do comparisons.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, I think that why we kind of wanted to talk to you all now is to understand like what resonates so that we can keep digging in some of the data. And I thought that was a really interesting finding. Again, I think what we need to do, my sort of intuition there is like, well, we need to move beyond averages, right? Like we need to move beyond average wage growth and average rent increase to try and understand more deeply where there might be pockets of mismatch, where we're seeing housing burden maybe increase in certain tranches versus, rapidly decrease in other tranches. So all I know right now is that sort of overall finding. But I think it would be a really good idea to sort of try to dig under that and understand, just because on average, that's what's happening. Are there, does that help us focus in on where the highest needs are?
And Catherine, just to follow up on that, are you talking about the overall like county or the DMC district as far as the wage growth and housing burden?
That I believe, I'll have to go back and verify, but I believe was geographically bounded in the DMC district in the downtown.
That's a great point. That's an
Yeah.
excellent point. Mhm. Yeah, because again, we've had discussions in all the meetings I've had that, for many folks, they have, really had a great increase in wages, but especially the folks that are doing supportive services are not getting those same type of increases, that are doing the supportive roles. So, again, looking at those specific, areas of AMI is really important for us to continue to dig down on, I think. Other questions? Any questions from anybody online? Molly? Okay.
All right, thank you. Yeah, just to piggyback off of Councilmember Keene's question about the West Transit Village, accessible parking is a huge issue, and of course, DMC is working a lot with construction downtown. Is there any work with that to help with accessible parking during not just the construction, but in the future for people who might not be able to use the West Transit Village? That's my first question. And my second question is, we talked about ADUs, and I know ADUs with we want to have more density in our city, having accessible ADUs, making sure that they are all available for people who are aging. What kind of work is being done with DMC for those two issues, the accessible parking and the ADUs that are accessible? Thank you.
Sure, thank you. So out at West Transit Village, there will be a public parking component that will enable people who aren't, being housed at or have their own unit. So there's public parking that will be available as part of the site build out there as well to access the BRT, which is a level boarding system, which we're really excited about. So it has that experience of not having, all of the gaps and the grade changes that some of the older systems have. So that will be a component of the site design there. And then I would say that universal design and the sort of all of the design elements that comprise that is something that would be integrated into that health in the built environment pillar, as well as we're looking pretty closely at 80 cities, which is another really great model that says, if you can design something that works for an 8-year-old and an 80-year-old, then it probably works really well for everybody. And so those are some of the accessibility considerations that we try to layer into every project.
Catherine, can you say what that is, the 80s? I've never heard of that.
Oh, it's a really great organization. It's the numeral 8, so 880.org, I want to say is probably their website. But it's a whole movement and organization and design set of frameworks to talk about how if we really design our cities for 8-year-olds and 80-year-olds, we've really probably made something that works really well for a lot of people. So.
Love that. Thanks. I'm going to go next to Randy.
Hi, Catherine. At our Monday council meeting, Joe Marie presented the latest iteration of the Maxfield study. And one of the stats that really stuck out to me was the combination of 40% increase in rents and the lowering of the vacancy rate in rental housing. So from your perch, do you see, what do you see happening in the rental market, specifically affordable housing? And is Rochester different or in comparison to other communities on that front?
Yeah. Well, I do think, and this has been a challenge over the last several years, there's a national, obviously, context that is really been challenging in terms of the rising costs of construction and the sort of rising cost of lending that have led to continued undersupply while our housing needs are only increasing. So that is like a sort of national perspective that's impacting the entire country. So then what does that mean in Rochester, and what does that mean specifically in the downtown for us? And I think there's a portion of this challenge that is national. And so then what can we specifically, where are our specific opportunities where we can maybe create the most opportunity? And I think that is what we're sort of in this whole process of teasing out looking forward. You can see from the last 5 years that there was a shift much more towards the more deeply, what I'm calling, there's a higher ratio of income restricted projects being supported. And so, we've kind of seen that shift already happening. But I think there's also the concern around, what can be done against these kind of national issues of everybody feeling underwater in terms of cost of capital and construction costs. And I think that's where things like making these long-term infrastructural investments in things like the BRT corridor that create a fare free to ride transportation option along that whole corridor with a fairly substantial walk shed that does contain some sites that could support more dense housing so that you could have more people within walking distance of that piece of infrastructure. I think that's kind of the place in where from a DMC perspective, we have more horsepower to sort of get behind something like a major infrastructure spine like that then unlocks additional opportunities for walkable housing.
I want to add some additional notes to what Catherine mentioned. It's part of our role at DMC and having those conversations with developers who come and thinking about developing a project. Because of this national, it's not just us, the whole country dealing with how difficult it is to build something with the rising cost of construction, is how can you package affordability? So as someone is presenting ideas, we do have a consultant on the retail side. How can we have access to affordable food in there? Because where are the food deserts? Where are the daycare deserts within the DMC district? So people, maybe the housing itself is not as affordable it used to be 5-10 years ago, but a daycare on the first floor is there, or a grocery store, or a free transportation for them. That would kind of cover that gap a little bit.
Offset the cost, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a good point to think about globally and how transportation and affordable utilities fits into the equation as well, for sure. I know Jim had one more follow-up question, and I think we need to wrap her up.
You mentioned cooperative coming to town. Is it a market rate or limited equity? Can you share any more information about the cooperative?
Yeah, so I'm sure there are probably others in the room. All I saw was the sort of city meeting was going to be happening to look at it. It's, I think, a limited equity co-op, and maybe someone else in the room. I just saw the packet. I'm not because it's outside the district. It's not in the district.
That's the Dell Web, so it's a little different than what we think about for senior, right?
There's a project northwest by Essex Park. Like adjacent to. Yeah, that's.
Oh, another co-op, is there?
It's pretty fresh off the press.
Very.
Okay, so I guess we'll have to explore that more and share more details with the group here. Because I wasn't aware of this either, so. Any final comments or questions before we let Catherine go?
I sent to both of you, Ruth and Joe Marie, the link to register for the Eventbrite for the annual meeting. We would love to see you all there. It's a free event because there'll be some engagement where we would like to get your input and get all these thoughts about housing, and your input would be very valuable in shaping the next 10 years of DMC's existence. And then I also shared with both of you to share with the group the link to the most recent real estate summit that we hosted last spring, where there was a presentation there about technology in housing. Am I correct, Catherine?
That's right. Yep.
You referred to, so for those who were interested about Dave Bill, I know you've asked about it, you can watch that too.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. We'll pass that information on. Yes.
And just one comment, sort of for the group, Catherine, but I think I saw this happen today, that DMC does a really good job of having data and being data driven, but they have data on the DMC areas. And sometimes people hear it as the community, or same thing with like the Maxfield is not the city, it's a bigger zone. So yeah, just a warning to be careful, don't upload them as citywide stats, or same thing with Maxfield. It's not just focused on the city, it's a bigger zone. And I think we have a little confusion here with that, that straightened out.
I think that's a great point.
When
Thank you.
and where is the September 8th meeting? Is that the one you're talking about?
Yes, yep, it's gonna be held in the Chateau Theater, the Peace Plaza, from 4 to 7 p.m.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, thanks again so much, Catherine. Really appreciate that. And we'll continue our collaboration and follow up. Appreciate all your work.